a lot of people think of it as more adventure-based, which it isn't always. People do experiential education and never get out of their seat, right? It can be a lecture, it can be a climbing gym, it can be a lot of different things. It has a lot to do with the approach. So if people noticed what happened this morning in terms of helping people make connections with one another, creating that foundation, and there are some foundational pieces, and this is what I teach my students because they're all doing a master's in experiential ed, having that option of choosing, right? Making challenge by choice or choose your challenge. Goal setting is another critical part of the work that we do. Making sure that you're clear about that. So you may have somebody who comes who says, it's my goal to be able to get out of my car. And it might not be a child who can't communicate that. It might be an adult with severe PTSD who says to you, today my goal is to get out of my car and look at the building. And then I'm going to go home. And tomorrow my goal is to come inside. And so just to understand that goal setting is important and what is our role in helping people to reach those goals. And so a lot of times when people come to a climbing gym or a ropes course or even to a cave, your immediate goal is, well, for climbing and ropes course, not caving, is to go like this, right? Everybody kind of looks up like, whoa, that's really, how am I going to get up there? Without thinking about all those intermediary goals that you can have in the meantime, right? Another piece of this is to pay attention to learning styles and the stages of group development. So when I asked, what's happening in our group, people were able to identify, oh yeah, well, we're talking to each other, we're having some fun, people are laughing a little bit. The group is definitely changing, it's coming together. As a facilitator, I have to notice those things, right? Is the group are there silos? Is the group doing this? What do I need to do to bring the group together so that we can support each other and help people meet their goals, right? That's critical to the work in experiential education. And then, just being able to create that sequence.
When we're talking the next 2 days about universal, what we're trying to get at is the idea that anyone is able to do these things without modifications, adaptations, things like that. So when we did that activity with our kind of goals, our working agreement, we were talking, one of them mentioned meeting everyone where they are and what their goals are, and not having expectations that we are placing on an individual. So kind of going off of that, for someone coming into a climbing gym, it might be rewarding for them to make it all the way to the top of a thing. And for someone else, it, again, could be walking in the door. Or some of us might have had experiences just having someone stand next to a harness for 10 minutes and not run away. So that's how kind of I envision the universal mindset, is how can everyone use it and they are getting what they want to get out of it. That it's without the need for adaptation. Okay, and so when we get into some of the other terms like accessibility and things like that, that's where we start to make modifications and things like that. Universal, we're talking about, like we talked about and read on the slide, anyone can use it how it is. So when we think about a facility and designing a facility and something like that, I think a lot of times we see, because of buildings being adapted for accessibility, they've got the stairs, and then somewhere else they've got the ramp, and anyone can use a ramp. And so if you design a building to be universal, it will just have a ramp, and that's how everyone can get up to that height, and that would be what we mean by universal. So when at ESI we build and design universal challenge courses, sometimes we take that into consideration to build a course where everyone can come out to the start in the same way, as opposed to having to climb to get onto it, and then you go around. So that's one example.
You've probably had the experience where you can say to an individual, yeah, who says, I'm not climbing, and you say, oh, okay, that's fine. You know, it's totally up to you. Would you hold this rope for me instead? Or whatever, you know, you find another job. How all of a sudden it feels okay. It kind of opens a door. It feels a little more empowering than that feeling of pressure, right? In what ways are we intentionally inviting? And we think about intentionality as having a plan, right? So, what we don't want is for people to get that deer in the headlights. Look, when they roll in with a wheelchair, or come in with crutches, or whatever, that you're ready, right? Because you have talked about this, you've done this training, you've come up with a plan, you have the equipment that you need, you have the staff that you need, and people are just welcomed in. Oh yeah, come on in, yeah, roll right through here, we got it, you know, this is good. And now our mats are going to go right down to the floor because then everybody can get up onto them, or we have a ramp or something like that, right? And you're intentional. This is where it starts, in the entryway. Welcome, you know, all climbers welcome, or something like that. You've checked your doorways to make sure that they are wide enough for anybody to get in. You've created signage that also includes pictures so that people who can't read those signs can understand what's about to happen because they can look at the pictures, right? And it feels welcoming. How many of you have been into a school or another building? I use schools as my example because that's my background. Stop. All visitors must register at the office, right? As opposed to, welcome. We're so happy that you're here. Please check in at the office so we have the opportunity to meet you. It does the same thing, right? But it sends a very different message. So that's the idea of being intentionally inviting. It begins with your facility, and it also includes your staff, and it includes the equipment that you have, and it includes your approach, right? So creating different ways, you know, if you are thinking, I'm going to have some things written down because I know that there are people who are visual learners that need to be able to read what I'm going to do, but I also need to read those things for people that can't read them, and I need to find, you know, have pictures, so it's all that stuff. Whatever you can do to make that environment feel welcoming and invitational. When people come in the door, are they being greeted, right? Greeted and welcomed in. That's one of the things that I try to do when I do a workshop like this, is just to be there and welcome people in and get to know their names and things like that, so that it feels invitational. I'm intentional about that. It's not something that I just do because I have met you before or whatever, right? I do it all the time because I know it makes a difference, right? And when you don't do it, people notice. So that's being intentionally inviting. And if you work with staff, think about how to make that happen. The other thing that happens a lot of times, more often, is that people are unintentionally inviting. That means we're nice people, right? People show up and we're friendly and, you know, you try to make it a good experience for everybody. You don't really have a plan, but you're nice. And you have a great space and it's going to be fun and you're a fun person and this is going to work great, right? And usually it does. Usually it does. Except for that morning that the dog throws up on the rug and your kid is having a tantrum. So all of a sudden, this person who's a really nice person, because you don't necessarily have a plan for the way things are going to go each day, you can drift down into unintentionally disinviting. You're not meaning to be unpleasant, mean, or disinviting, but it happens because things are just not going well, right? And who comes through the door may not get that greeting. They may not get that warm sense of welcome. They may not get the options. You might be a little short with them because you're having a rough time, right? So if you have a plan for how, and you're intentional about what you are going to do to create a welcoming environment, you'll be able to stay here, right? You won't be drifting down into this as much because you've thought about this, right? If you're intentionally disinviting, anybody ever have a teacher like that?
Oh, yeah.
Like, obviously should not be teaching children, then you need to find a different career because this is not the place, right, where you're working with people. Keeping the participant at the center of our work, no matter what. It's the participant and their dreams, their goals, their choices, their needs, and their, I'm going to say it, their safety, right? It all plays into, all of these things circle around that. So, and in no particular order or given any particular weight of one more than another, if we think about staff, what level of experience do people have? Obviously, you can't get experience unless you get a chance to do this stuff, right? So, can we put a staff person that's more of a novice with a more experienced staff person, or bring in an occupational therapist to work with our staff so that there's a comfort level of handling gear that they can work together on? I understand the climbing harnesses, they understand the wheelchairs. How can we get together on this, right? And understand that we don't have to know it all, but our different experience, and just the level of training, any stereotypes and mindset and abilities, just those people that are open-minded, that have some knowledge base, all of that stuff. So what are we looking at as far as staff that are going to be able to support our participants, and where are the gaps that we need to fill in, right? The facility, what kind of access do we have here? Is there protection? Obviously, we're inside here, so there's protection from outdoors, which is great. But for some people, that can be a thing. Where's the water? What are the restroom facilities like? All that stuff that matters. Is there a place in here for someone who might need to have clothing changed? If they need help with, being able to lay down, to have a more complete change of clothing, is there a place for that that's private? So just being aware of that kind of stuff. And then equipment, and the whole experience. What is there? We say elements. That's talking ropes course talk, but what are the different kinds of climbs that are available? What is the design like that makes it feel, more universal? And what choices do people have? So this is the triad of things that we need to be considering, and that's all ties back to that whole piece of being invitational, intentionally invitational. And then this is looking at the principles of universal design. So as you think about not just designing a facility, but designing a program, is it an equitable experience? Is it a good? Does it fit well? Okay. And when you see challenge course use, modified principles for challenge course use, think about that in terms of climbing wall use, because it's basically it transfers well. Is there engagement in the process? What are the perceptions of the experience? Is there a scope of safety and risk, economy and equity of effort, dimensions and intended use, and agency commitment? And that all comes out of the standard 7 principles, which were developed in North Carolina: equitable use, flexibility in use, simple and intuitive use, perceptible information, tolerance for error, low physical effort, size and space for approach and use. By low physical effort, And you're like, wait a minute, this is a climbing gym. We're not supposed to have low physical effort. This is supposed to be hard, right? By low physical effort, it means that people can participate without having it, just the act of getting into the building, be a huge thing, right? If you choose to come and exert yourself, that's your choice. Being able to access the facility. So this is the universal design principles.